Laszlo, let's get started. Let me ask you, what brought you to the Scrum community? What originally, what originally did you see within Scrum, or how did you come about coming into the Scrum community?
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Kane. Great question. So got into the Scrum community, I guess, pretty early on. Maybe 2003, 2004 timeframe.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, my brother Victor and I had a company, a little consulting company based in Seattle, Washington, called Danube Technologies. And one of our employees at that time was a guy named Michael James.
Mm-hmm.
And we were looking at how do we contemplate project management? Because it wasn't something when we were doing these kind of smaller scale projects that we really contemplated, really thought through. And we had some pain. And so Michael and Victor did some research, and they found Ken Schraber's book. And we were looking for kind of how to lay out physical spaces and things like that for a more collaborative work environment. And so that's how we first heard about Scrum. And we decided to try it whole hog on a government project. And it was with the state of Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And the customer loved it. In fact, one of those customers moved into our office as product owner, and it was kind of the rest is history. So that's kind of how we got started. I can elaborate if you want, if you like.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, sure. So I can tell you the whole story. So from there, we started getting into more and more projects and trying to get on more and more projects. And what we found, it was it really helped us. It helped us with customer satisfaction. It helped us with predictability. It helped us a lot with employee morale. And as a small company, you're kind of looking for every little edge that can retain customers and employees, because without that, you're kind of dead in the water. The blood of your company is kind of dead. And from my standpoint, I was pretty pragmatic about it because I was on the business side, and really Michael and Victor and some of the others like Kelly and they were kind of doing the kind of the heavy lifting, right? And Eric and them. And so, and then, as is the case with many kind of services-based companies, we had a business that was ebbing and flowing. And sometimes we had a lot of business and we were really busy. And other times we were kind of bored, for lack of a better word. We didn't have any projects. So what we decided to do is we decided to go out and build a project management tool that modeled Scrum. And what we did is we tried to model it exactly to Scrum.
Yep.
And the idea of that initially just came as a way to kind of proof of concept how we work, right? So we could show, okay, we can do a project, and here's what a project looks like. And we started kind of showing this project management tool to different people in the community. For example, Dan Rossthorn and Mike Cohen. And Dan kind of said, well, are you guys planning to charge for this? And we said, no, we're just, and he kind of looked at me and said, well, you might want to think about that. And so then that's kind of how things got started. Then we ended up having, we launched the ScrumWorks product in August of 2004 at the XP Universe show, which is now the Agile 2000X series.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, Rally Software was also there. They launched the same trade show, actually, interestingly enough, their product. And that's kind of how we got started. And we found that that ScrumWorks product created a huge lead generation engine for us, and got us interested and noticed by a lot of kind of the early adopters, like who was the company? I think TransCanada was, I think, one of the first companies doing Scrum.
Yep.
TransCanada Pipelines.
Yep. TCP.
Yep. TransCanada Pipelines. I think you were working on that project, maybe.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. So, and then there were some others as well. I think Capital One, which I think you were working on Capital One at that time as well.
Yep. I was working with ThoughtWorks at the time, but yes, for both TransCanada and TCPL and Capital One, I was working with ThoughtWorks. So you were selling the ScrumWorks Pro tool to both TCPL as well as Capital One?
So let me correct myself here. At that time, it was just free.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Just totally free. And the idea was just lead generation. And the idea of it being free was primarily because we were so small of a company, we couldn't afford the infrastructure to build a support team, to build an SLA, a service level agreement around the product.
Yeah.
And so we got around those difficult questions by just kind of rationalizing it as free or freeware. But what we did get out of it were interesting conversations. And then we landed some pretty large contracts, for example, with the state of Washington. I think we were involved in the first ever government Scrum project. So it was the first time they used the word Scrum in a government RFP. That was in 2004, late 2004, I think October of 2004. And interestingly enough, we were competing against Solutions IQ, which is where I am today.
So was the state of Washington, were they asking for a Scrum project, or so they were explicitly asking to do Scrum?
They were explicitly put it into the RFP. There was a very progressive guy there. I think his last name was Cain, C-A-I-N. I think his name was John Cain, I think. Don't quote me on that, but that's the name that comes to mind. Yeah. And there were some very progressive project managers there, like Ann Dillon, and they just kind of brought us in, and they said, look, we have to use Scrum. That was a prerequisite.
Interesting.
And then we said, hey, we know Scrum. And the way it all came about, actually, was at that XP Universe show where we launched ScrumWorks. Victor, my brother, did an introduction to Scrum talk. Right. So these days, when you go to the Agile show, you're not going to get too many what is Scrum basics talks. But in 2004, that was a big topic. It's essentially an engineering XP conference. And two guys from Washington State government were in the audience. And they approached him afterwards and said, hey, we got this project. We got this RFP. There's not too many people who know about Agile and Scrum. And interestingly enough, right, they were based in Olympia, Washington, and we were headquartered at that time in Seattle, Washington. And we were just laughing because we could have been in Detroit and they could have been in Nashville. You just never know at these trade shows. And so we ended up winning a piece of that business, and then that kind of parlayed us into kind of a full-fledged training business, right? Training and coaching business. And I think at that time we brought you on actually as an employee from ThoughtWorks. We brought on folks like Dan Rossthorn. We brought on folks like Michael James became a CST. My brother became a CST, and then we just kind of began teaching. And one of the first classes I think my brother did, was probably in late 2005. His first class I think was with Boris Glogger. So it was just like early days, very early.
Yeah, pretty exciting too.
That's how we got into it.
So you were using the ScrumWorks tool that you guys built. You were using it as a lead generation?
Yeah.
So originally it was free.
Primarily
lead generation. And at what point did that...
And brand awareness, right? And brand awareness, because now you're introducing your brand to these mega companies, right? And here's a little company in Seattle. We're not going to get the attention of Capital One.
That's right.
Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So, for example. And it provided a great kind of talking point. And then we just kind of built a business, around that. We had a freeware product. We had a training business. We did some coaching work, some transformation work. But that was kind of early days on the transformation side as well. I mean, if I remember correctly, you were at QPass, which then got acquired by Amdocs in the Seattle market. We had folks at City of Seattle. And just trying to build a business, right? So,
At what point did ScrumWorks become a commercial product? Because it's now a commercial product?
Yeah, so great question. So it became commercial. We did a double down in late 2006, and all the money we made off of that contract in Washington State, instead of putting it into our pockets, we invested that in a development team.
Right.
And we ended up funding that development team and launching a for-pay product January 15th of 2007. So that's when it hit the market as for-pay. And we had two versions, right? We had kind of this, what they call freemium model. We had the free version and the paid version.
And so how did that work out? How did that commercial product work out?
I think it worked out okay. I mean, we were able to... again, if you're looking at the history, right, kind of between 2007 and 2010, we were able to hold our own in the market. We eventually ended up selling Danube and Scrum, and as part of that, ScrumWorks.
Mm.
And that acquisition, we sold the company in 2010, February of 2010, to CollabNet.
Mm-hmm.
And when we sold the company, we had, I think, in the neighborhood of 20,000 paid users and 125,000 free users. So a substantial user base.
Yeah, I was about to say that's fairly sizable.
Yeah,
that's nothing to sniff at all. Quite sizable.
yeah. And I think if you were early days, like if you were really in the Scrum community in 08, 09, 07, or before, you either tried ScrumWorks on a project or you used ScrumWorks.
Yeah.
I think that was, even if you didn't like it, you at least, took a look at it. That was kind of my feeling.
Mm.
So...
It was certainly very common. I don't see it quite so much anymore because there are a whole bunch of other free tools that people use. So, for example, Trello is a very common one to see at the moment. And before that, what was it called? Pivotal Labs, their free tool. Used to be maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Used to be really common, but certainly before that, ScrumWorks was it was an equivalent piece of software that people would often try and use.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. And so you sold the company to CollabNet in 2010. What happened after that? How did that actually? Let me ask. How did that all work out? Did that work out all right for both you and Victor?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when we started the company, we never knew where it was going to end. So we started the company early days. We started in 2000. I had just graduated from college in May. We started the company in August. So I essentially took the summer off and started a company, which was an interesting journey in and of itself, just learning about business and people, without any kind of real world business experience. And we learned a lot of lessons the hard way about people and about money and about, all those things, financing and all that stuff. And I think when we sold the company, we had a wonderful team. I mean, you were part of that team for many years. We had other people like Angela Druckman and Jimmy Fosdick who kind of came in later, and just a great sales team. And it really did feel like family, and really proud of those accomplishments. And Victor and I did well, as part of that sale. I mean, I feel really good about that. So, and I feel like CollabNet got a good deal as well. So I think both sides benefited greatly.
What drove you to sell the company at the end? What was it? What was the motivating factor? Stress?
Yeah, I was, when, we had no venture capital money. We had essentially no banking support in terms of a big debt round or something like that. We had very little friends and family money in the business. And when you're carrying all of those things on your own shoulders, it can just kind of grind you down, wear you out. And I was getting to a point where it was affecting my personal relationships. And I knew enough to know that was bad. And the other thing, was the September of 2008 financial crash. That definitely scared us because we kind of had meetings in October, November, December, looking at each other going, we're doing everything right, and the world around us is collapsing, and you can't really talk to any honest CEO who would tell you that their business was growing in 2009 in the space. I mean, most of us were flat. Or growing a little bit. And so those things all played into it. And we just didn't know. I mean, the other interesting thing at that time, if you go back into the history and the politics of the Scrum Alliance, at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty within the Scrum Alliance.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of uncertainty around Ken's role, around what Jeff was doing, around what, Mike Cohen was kind of hovering around, wanting to take a leadership role or a bigger leadership role. You had guys like Tom Meller in there, and we couldn't make heads or tails out of the community. and we were very concerned that it would become fractured, similar to kind of the Linux distributions.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's kind of how it played out, because you have Scrum.org and you have Scrum Alliance and you have a number of different certifying bodies, and if you listen to them, they're not really aligned that much. So we thought they were going to be more divided. I mean, I guess there's some common threads, but we thought it was going to be kind of divided. So those things all played into it.
Yeah.
All played into it.
Yeah. And so you were at CollabNet. When you sold the company, you joined the company as well? You joined CollabNet?
Yeah. So I was at CollabNet about 3.5 years. And, they provided an extremely positive experience for me as it relates to some of the things I was able to do. I mean, my boss, Mike, was great in the sense that he enabled me to go out and become, I'll say, kind of a real businessman. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, I've done over the past, and I know that you'll recognize this, over the past 3 years, I did 500,000 miles of air travel. Yeah. And global travel. I was allowed to run. I was the vice president of Asia Pac for a year, which meant trips to Korea, extended trips to Korea, China, and Japan, as well as Malaysia and Singapore. And all those things kind of helped me understand how different people communicate, and it gave me a broader concept of just people in general, and it gave me broader perspective and helped me mature. And at the same time, it was all still within the Scrum and Agile domain. So it kept me kind of focused and interested in the community in general. But, you go into Korea. I was in Korea in 2012 having similar conversations that you and I were having in 2005 around, how do you scale from 1 team to 3 teams? Or, how do you, what do you do with HR? So they're kind of, in that sense, organizational issues are a little bit behind. They're not, the kind of the cutting edge stuff today in Agile and Scrum is cutting edge maybe in North America and maybe in Europe, but in other parts of the world it's still laggard, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, that's very true. That's also true here in the Australia market. Australia is a couple of years behind probably North America.
Yeah. But it was fun. I mean, I went to India, I went to Brazil, I went to, according to Trip It, which is the program I'm using to track it, I've been into 100 different big cities.
That's a lot of cities.
Yeah, it's kind of fun if you look at it that way. Yeah. But a lot of time away from home and all that. And, I sat down with my bosses at CollabNet earlier in this year, and I said, hey, I kind of want to travel a little bit less, and we couldn't come to terms on that. So I said, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to make a switch.
And so that's why you're at Solutions IQ.
Yeah, that's right. And so I've known Charlie, the owner of Solutions IQ, since kind of 2004 timeframe, because we were competing against each other at the state contract. Yep. And I came in, talked to them, and they really, my feeling is Solutions IQ, here at Solutions IQ, we have agility and agile in our bones and in the DNA. Yep. And it's been a transformation. It wasn't the case, say, in 2004 or 2005. And it's just wonderful. And you feel like you have a seat at the table. Yep. For example, tomorrow we're bringing all of our consultants to our home office. We have about 125 consultants today out doing different projects around the U.S. So they'll all come in, they'll all fly in tomorrow, and we'll do what we call retrospace, which is a retrospective and an open space around time. Organizational issues.
Cool.
So for us, that's cool. For me, that's interesting.
Yeah. Is Solution IQ, is it still predominantly a Pacific Northwest company, or has Solutions IQ expanded nationally within the US?
Yeah, so great question. So great brand awareness here in the Pacific Northwest, especially here in Seattle area. And one of the reasons I was brought in is to expand that presence and build it to let's call it a leading domestic brand, which means having more and more projects out of state, places like New York or Michigan or Texas or California.
Ohio.
Or Ohio, right? So that's part of my mission here. And my role here, I guess, is vice president, and I'm doing things related to sales and marketing and training operations. So it's a pretty weighty goal, but I think we can. It's a pure services company, so I think we're going to have some success with expansion.
Cool. So when you say pure services, does Solutions IQ not produce any products at all?
That's correct.
That's interesting. I always thought that they might have something, but not the case.
No, not the case. So it's part, again, that's part of the makeup of the organization is no products. So in that sense, I think we're, positioning against kind of some of the folks like ThoughtWorks. We have kind of a different difference in the DNA there, right? ThoughtWorks to me is different in the sense that, kind of come watch us work. Versus with us, it's kind of like come work with us. It's kind of a little bit different. And again, also, right, they have the Mingle product and Go and some other products. And if you don't want to use those products, then, they may not want to do business with you. So we have some neutrality there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
So that covers my first couple of questions, which are how did you come to the Scrum community, and also what are you currently doing now? Where do you see the future of Scrum going? Where do you see the future of Agile going?
Okay, so I have the same question for you. Who should answer first?
So do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first? Or?
Sure.
I'm not sure. I've got no idea. I really don't.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
it's a long time, right? I mean, you've been in the industry since before it was an industry.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, and the reason why I say that is because my feeling is that there will be something very similar to Scrum around, but whether it will be called Scrum in 10 years' time or not, I don't know. I think the elements, the basic structure of Scrum is so fundamental. I think it's just really, really a very fundamental and a very natural framework that going forward, there will be always some element of that framework in whatever we do. But whether it will be called Scrum, whether it will be called Agile, whether it will be called something else, I have a hard time trying to see that far into the future. At the moment, the feeling that I'm getting is that, in large part, the word Scrum is heavily overused, and the word Agile is heavily overused, and people will use the word Agile for whatever they're doing. They're doing waterfall in 3 monthly cycles. They'll call it Agile. They'll call it Agile Waterfall or something like that, and people put the brand Agile on just about everything. I think I was speaking to James Copeland. I was speaking to him 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he said that the Japanese have the notion that you can overuse a word, you can overtax the spirit of a word, and when you do that, then the word loses its meaning. And I think that's a very valid point with the word Agile. And I can see that maybe, or I can speculate that maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, the whole word or the whole Agile movement could be something that people frown upon, that people will want to distance themselves from. And so where will Scrum be in 10 years' time? It's very difficult to say. I think there'll be many people who will be doing Scrum-like approaches to delivering software, but whether it'll be called Scrum or not is a different matter.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Cope, because I actually had a similar conversation with him in Tokyo. So it's interesting, Japanese people. But anyway, so that was kind of an interesting dinner actually. Yeah, so my take on it is actually a little bit different. I mean, I think we still have a huge runway here. I think there's a huge market. And I think we're just now getting into interesting questions. For example, the questions around compliance.
Yes.
You know, to me, you know, doing Scrum in a heavily regulated industry, which there are many, or trying to contemplate, like one of the research projects that Pat Reed is involved in, and I've been kind of I don't want to say helping her with, but kind of it's an area of interest for me as well, is around how to navigate, you know, the generally accepted accounting practice rulings in the U.S. with Scrum teams, because those rulings were written with waterfall teams in mind.
That's right. Yeah.
When we start hitting those kinds of boundaries, that tells me we're having success. But when we have known organizational patterns or enterprise patterns for those types of things, that's when I kind of know it's run its course. I don't think it's run its course yet, and I think that I remember how you used to feel about this years ago, but you know, the distributed and large scale agile. If I remember correctly, you didn't even think you wanted to build software with 10,000 people or something like that. Philosophically, that was kind of your take, if I remember. Is that still kind of where you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So my point on that is that, to me, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, right, it still comes back to kind of those nodes, right? The teams doing the work, or the people doing the work, or the work product in and of itself. And that work will continue forever. And then the other thing, right, is you have this kind of, I'm going to try to draw a graph here with my hands, but you have kind of a timeline, right, on the x-axis, and then you have your number of software developers in the world as an axis, and then you have your lines of code, right? And your lines of code is growing exponentially. And your number of developers is not. And even companies that are not, you wouldn't necessarily consider to be software companies, for example, American Express, Chase, or Capital One, so we're talking about Capital One, American Express, or take, for example, FedEx. I mean, FedEx, I think, has like 7,000 software developers, right? American Express has 12,000. The amount of software that needs to be done to support these non-software organizations is incredible, which tells me that we're going to hit a tipping point, right? And people are going to get frustrated, and I don't think we're even close. I think you're looking at, you know, a 30 to 50 year run here.
That's fantastic.
It's not close, right? I mean, you can't tell me that, you know, people talk at these big companies. I don't want to name a company, but say some random big company, they talk about business agility, but they're talking about maneuverability, being able to maneuver your business. And that's very different than the rigor and the discipline it takes to run a Scrum team. Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah.
And it means something very different.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of where we're going. So that's my take on it. So another 50 years. That means we'll have gray hair by then.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually, from a business point of view, I mean, that I really like what you say there, because from a business point of view, it does give me a lot more hope, because I do tend to be incredibly cynical, and that's perhaps overly so. That's just me as a person. So I do tend to be terribly cynical about the whole thing. So to get a second point of view is, you know, really, really good to hear. Really interesting. Cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to do the interview with you. I hope someone will watch that, and then we can get some hate mail going or something.
Or fan mail, as the case may be.
Yeah, that'd be great. So thank you for the opportunity, Kane. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for your time, Laz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye now.